to open up transatlantic routes. He said that a US-UK working group had met the week before for the first time, yet no update has been provided on that today. So can I ask how many more times it's met since then and what progress has been made? Importantly, Madam Deputy Speaker, international travel community and the tourism sector needed the government to really step up, but I'm afraid ministers found themselves wanted. Labour is clear that the government must follow the example of other countries by intervening and bringing forward a sectoral deal to protect jobs. So can I ask the Minister why still the government haven't brought forward such a deal when the Chancellor promised it nearly a year ago? When I visited Heathrow last month, they noted that over a quarter of their cost base goes in fees and levy to government. If ministers don't want a support package that's holistic, can they at least look at the fees that are paid directly to government? And on Eurostar, why haven't they had the same business rate support as aviation? As an international travel operator, it should be a level playing field. And before I end, Madam Deputy Speaker, I did want to touch on the fact that this announcement didn't cover mask wearings. It's pretty clear that the government have been all over the place on mask wearing, despite masks reducing the risk of passing on the virus to other people, critically, especially on public transport. Why does the Secretary of State believe they should only now be subject to personal choice? And like me, will he commit to continuing to wear his mask on public transport?
State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Honourable Gentleman mentions the JCB data. The methodology is on the website, as I mentioned to him before. I'm sure they will continue to publish a fuller range of analysis as more countries are moved about. And, of course, we've got the next review of the green, red and amber list on the 15th of July. India, he brings us up every time that we speak, and it doesn't matter how many times you explain the fact. We put them on the list 2 weeks before, on the red list. 2 weeks before they became a variant of concern, a week ahead of them being even a variant of interest, and yet he still continues to come to this House and say that time again. He mentions the list of 30 locations which are accepting either the NHS app or an NHS letter. They are already published. They're available on the FCDO website, and it gives me the opportunity to stress that when somebody travels to any location, they will want to use the FCDO website as the Bible for what will be the requirement on entry and departure from that country. I just wanted to update him on one late change, just so the House can note that it's not just children travelling with adults, it will be all children who will be exempt in the same way as somebody who is double vaccinated. He mentions the costs of tests. I've come to this dispatch box before and agreed that the costs of tests were too high, and I'm very pleased that since May the costs have continued to be driven down as over 400 providers are stepped up to the plate to produce these tests. I was looking this morning, there are tests as inexpensive as a tenner, albeit that those are tests in person, but there are quite a number of tests now for much lower prices than the ones that were previously being stated. The update on the working group with the US-UK that Biden and the Prime Minister announced is ongoing. Those meetings are taking place each and every week. As I've explained to the House before, there are quite a lot of technicalities to overcome, not least an executive order from the previous US administration, 212F, which actually bans travel for anyone who's been in the UK or Europe for the 14 days previous. And we're working through all those issues with them. They're being held at official level currently. In terms of support for the industry, I think it's a pity today that the Honourable Gentleman didn't reflect what the industry itself is saying. I noticed that the Airport Operators Association is saying this is a significant step forward, that they widely welcome it, that they say that people will be able to get away on a well-deserved break. The Airlines UK, who represent the airlines, say this is a positive move towards genuinely reopening the sector, and they warmly welcome it once again. And I have to say, when the Honourable Gentleman says Labour have been clear, he says, it's anything but clear. What is clear is there's a division between him and the Shadow Home Secretary. Madam Deputy Speaker, first of all, they wanted quarantine lessened. Then they wanted everyone in a hotel. Then they wanted it to be done on a case-by-case basis. Then they wanted to shut down travel, open up travel, put everyone on a red list and more countries to the green list. Mr. Speaker, this isn't a policy, it's just plain politics.
Mrs. Theresa May.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I say to my right honourable friend that I welcome his statement today. This is the first step in opening up Britain for business. But I note in his statement he said that people should expect their experience at the border may be different, with longer waiting times than before. When queues at the border have been a problem in the past, extra staff have been brought in, including from other government departments, to support Border Force. Will my right honourable friend, on behalf of the government, guarantee that every effort will be made to bring in extra resources, deploy staff in different ways, including changing staff rotas at Border Force, in order to ensure that there can be a smooth movement of people through our borders and that we do not see inordinately long queues?
Thank you, and yes, I welcome my right honourable friend's intervention. She's absolutely right. In fact, I've been working with the Home Secretary and Border Force on exactly this issue. I should be perhaps a little bit more specific about where travellers might expect queues. Quite a lot of the checking will be done upstream, in other words, before you board the aircraft, typically, what could be a train or a boat, from your location that you're coming back from. And so that queues at check-in whilst you're abroad may in fact be the place where those problems most exist. I know that many of the airlines are developing systems to further automate that check-in, but they will be doing quite a complicated job, checking the passenger locator form against the booked test still required on day 2, and of course vaccine status as well. So I just think it's fair to warn people who are travelling this summer that is something that we haven't had to do before, but she's absolutely right to say that it's important that the borders at this end are as smooth as possible. Indeed, a lot of investments going into automating all of that.
SNP spokesperson Gavin Newlands.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I can also thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of the statement. I should start by saying I share the Honourable Member for Oldham's concerns about the lack of transparency in the data, and I have to say the Secretary of State's answers simply aren't good enough in that. We need to see more data and more quickly than we are at the moment. And I have to say the Secretary of State is, and whilst I do welcome the thrust of the statement, the Secretary of State is being just a little disingenuous when he says in the statement that the industry tells him that support is welcome, but they need to get flying again. That in and of itself is of course correct, but what he didn't say is that industry is still crying out for further support, because most of the industry has not had grant support despite being the hardest hit sector in the economy. I've said a number of times now in the last few weeks that Glasgow Airport in my constituency has lost a third of the workforce that's based on site. That's 2,000 jobs gone locally at the airport, and well over another 1,000 jobs beyond the airport connected to aviation. And in terms of the Scottish summer season is already well over 2 weeks old, and by the time this policy kicks in for England, teachers in my area will be back in schools 3 weeks thereafter, so it's a very short window that remains. So the government must extend furlough for the sector, no ifs, no buts. And whilst this announcement will help, the number of passengers will still be significantly down, so the need for a sector-specific support package is still very clear. And from the outset, the Scottish Government have said that caution is required regarding international travel, and people should think very carefully about travelling abroad as situations can suddenly change. The Scottish Government will continue to work closely with the other home nations and are cautiously supportive of exploring options for the easing of restrictions for fully vaccinated travellers arriving from countries on the amber list, but only if the clinical advice supports it and if systems are in place to ensure the wider safety of the Scottish population. And I have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that rumours for months have circulated about cabinet discussions, robust cabinet discussions on international travel, with often, amongst others, the previous Health Secretary and the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster on one side, and the Chancellor and the Secretary of State on the other. And one can't help note the change of pace and the changes to international travel now that the new Health Secretary is in place. But I wonder, how can plans for an ambitious return of travel be made if the UK Government's rush to unlock domestically means, with 100,000 cases a day, etc., means other countries close their borders to UK travellers? And then lastly, Madam Deputy Speaker, as has been said, mask wearing on aircraft, indeed in all public transport, is to most of us a no-brainer. And as he didn't address the Shadow Secretary of State's question, I'll ask again, will mask wearing on aircraft be compulsory, and will the Secretary of State confirm if he will continue to wear masks on all public transport?
State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, I just should point out the change of pace is because we now have a situation where the majority of adults in the UK are vaccinated, and that was not fully vaccinated. And that was not the case. It wasn't the case a month ago when we postponed step 4. It is the case now, and I can confirm to the honourable gentleman I was already discussing these changes with the previous health secretary, in fact. He's absolutely right. I did omit to mention about masks, and I should just bring the House up to speed. We will be still in guidance providing information about mask wearing. We know that it's sensible in more enclosed spaces, and I will wear a mask personally where it is appropriate to do so. And the airlines have already said it's a condition of carriage in, I think, all the cases that I've seen. And where it's a condition of carriage, of course, we would always wear it. On the other hand, if you're in an empty carriage on a long-distance train for many hours, then people will use their common sense. And it's something on this side of the House we absolutely applaud and agree with. We're pleased to be able to get back to a guidance situation. I have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, when I hear the honourable gentleman quite frequently, he is a doughty campaigner for Glasgow Airport, and he often challenges me on this, I have to say to him that he might want to look a little bit closer to home. It's only very recently, in June, that the Scottish Government banned Scots from travelling to Manchester. As a direct result, EasyJet cancelled new routes which would have connected a whole bunch of Scottish airports. And no wonder the Scottish Passenger Agents Association has said that the Scottish Government is sacrificing them in their approach to aviation. So I think a lot of the answers that he's looking for, I'm afraid, are close to home. Meanwhile, the UK Government has provided £7 billion of support to the sector. And this opening up today, I notice so far, has yet to be reflected by announcements by the Scottish Government as well. If he really wants to help, I think he can help move along the policy in Scotland as well.
Chair of the Transport Select Committee, Hugh Merriman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Rejoice, rejoice. This is a much-needed shot in the arm for those who've had 2 shots of the vaccine in their arm, and for an industry and workforce who have been laid low during the pandemic, perhaps more than others, but have always been confident and steadfast in their belief that we can all travel safely again. So in welcoming this announcement, can I ask the Secretary of State to also keep an eye on the testing regime? We know that for the last couple of months, those who have come back from amber destinations, only 0.4% of those have tested positive for COVID. So can we perhaps look at the testing costs? They are still a barrier for those travelling. It would be great if, rather than having an expensive PCR test, lateral flow could be used instead, and those who do test positive could then use a PCR. Those kind of ideas I would really look for the Secretary of State to keep on championing, and can he make sure that the Foreign Office advice and website is as up-to-date as he is on this matter?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank my honourable friend. He does a superb job as the chair of the Select Committee and has been very consistent in his support for the aviation sector. He'll be interested to know, as the whole House will, that we'll have a further review date of this on the 31st of July. That's a checkpoint for the rules themselves, so that will be the date. Currently, the scientific evidence is that PCR tests, in addition to being a bit more accurate, are also the ones which can be quickly a sequence for the genome to look for variants as well. And his points about the FCDO and ensuring that all of that advice ties together are well understood, and we'll make sure we work closely with that department.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This week, both the Prime Minister and the Health Secretary have warned of a considerable spike in the level of infections, perhaps 100,000 positive cases detected every day. This clearly is going to put pressure on our testing services, but also will have a chilling effect on inbound travel, as people will have choices to travel to nations where there is a lower infection rate. As a result of that, what kind of compensation is he looking to bring forward to the travel industry for many of the companies in my constituency who have really struggled over the last year because of the lack of government support? And will we ensure that that support is long-term so that these companies can have that bridge into their future?
Secretary of State.
Well, it is, of course, true to say that there is a third wave with the Delta variant. We're in the fortunate position in the United Kingdom of having this exceptional vaccination programme, which has enabled us to, on the 19th of July, provided that it's confirmed on Monday, open up. I've described from the dispatch box today how we'll allow people who've been vaccinated through the UK vaccination programme to travel again and come back and treat those amber countries as if they're green. We will, on the other side of that, work on a phase 2, which will enable people to travel here. And I'm working closely with the Culture Secretary to ensure that can restart as soon as is possible. We need to be able to trust their vaccination programme and be able to qualify that they've had a particular type of test, of course. That is the best way to help those travel firms in her constituency. And I must just pick up, £7 billion is not a drop in the ocean. It is a lot of money that's being used to support the travel sector. We're proud to have done so, but the very best thing will be to get the sector opened up again.
We now go via video link to Julian Sturdy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This announcement is a big step forward in the right direction and will provide a much needed boost for the travel sector. So I really do welcome what the Secretary of State has said. It will provide a meaningful choice as well for holiday destinations for families looking to go abroad this summer. However, as the Chair of the Transport Select Committee has already touched on, the Secretary of State will be aware that testing requirements remain both costly and burdensome, especially for families going forward. So noting he mentions the date of the 31st of July, I note that, but will he also commit to keeping the testing under regular reviews? And also, can he look not just at the cost, but also the bureaucracy that goes with this, that is, and it does have an impact on families going on holiday?
Secretary of State.
I certainly welcome, my honourable friends, welcome of the policy. And on the cost of tests, I do just want, because what tends to happen is the narrative runs a bit behind what's actually happening in the real world. So I jumped on the gov.uk website this morning to take a look at myself. There are some very inexpensive tests. I think the cheapest I saw was £4.95. Now, that's actually quite specific because it referred to somebody turning up at an individual test centre. They may not live anywhere near to it. So let's assume, though, that the tests are higher than the cost of tests are higher than that, but also recognise that they're no longer at the hundreds of pounds that were being quoted in the spring. I want to see that continue to be driven down, and I do give him my assurance that we'll carry on working with the scientists and looking at the data. We won't be testing people for a moment longer than is required, but our primary responsibility, of course, is to protect people in the UK. We do not want to have a variant come in that we simply fail to pick up.
Now go via video link to Ben Bradshaw.
I warmly welcome this statement, Madam Deputy Speaker. It finally restores to us some of the freedoms our European neighbours and Americans have been enjoying for some considerable time. But if I understood the Secretary of State correctly, the green list testing requirements will still leave travel more restricted this summer than it was last summer when we didn't have the vaccines. And of course, reciprocity, as he will understand, is absolutely vital when it comes to travel. And the lack of immediate reciprocity for other countries means they're less likely to open up to us anytime soon. So why, when many European countries already accept our vaccine passport, are we incapable of accepting theirs now?
Thank you very much. Well, of course, reciprocity is very important in this, and I've already explained the situation with the United States. And reciprocity would involve them not having Executive Order 212F in place, of course. That would immediately relieve some of the issues there. They do still have 50 different ways to verify tests because there's no central system. Each state has its own version. The European example is a better one, as he says. I am working very closely with my European counterparts in regular contact, and we wanted to have a first phase in place as quickly as possible, easy to verify through the UK vaccine programme, but we will move as quickly as possible, I think, to satisfy his concerns about working with other countries, including the EU digital passport.
We now go via video link to Mark Harper.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I very much welcome this statement from the Secretary of State and also his restatement of the significant financial support given to the sector. What's his judgment about whether these changes that have been announced will allow the sector to stand on its own feet from a business viability perspective, or are we still going to have to put significant sums of public money into it? This is a debate that we need to have. Every bit of caution that people advocate, comes with a price tag that has to be met by the taxpayer. And that debate, I think, is essential as we go forward.
I think it's worth reflecting that this country is leading the way. I was having a look at which other countries, certainly in Europe, major economies are going for an unlock as we expect and hope to do on the 19th, subject to confirmation next Monday. And I don't see any other country who are opening up domestically quite as much. And it is time, as I think I know he agrees, to learn to live with the coronavirus. We have many advantages this year that we didn't have last year. Easily available testing, much reduced in price, vaccination, immunisation for people, all adults being able to access it. And that does mean that we can move to what will, I think, become the new world of aviation. I think to answer his question, in my conversations with the aviation sector in particular, many of them have downsized. They're now ready to start upsizing gradually as we come out of, I think, what has been the most horrendous couple of years on record for that sector.
Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Not only has the government's hotel quarantine policy been an utter mess, the handling of complaints and legitimate calls for exemption have been painfully slow through official channels. I've had toddlers left without milk, kids so poorly nourished in these hotels that ambulances have been called out. Some people have been left without access to drinking water, and families in Luton are being charged nearly £2,500 for this. Can the Secretary of State tell me who is making a profit on these astronomical charges, and why is there no discount for people on low incomes?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think the Honourable Lady is absolutely right to highlight these cases and fight for her constituents. I do just want to point out that the figure that is charged at the moment does not make a profit for the government. In fact, it's still being somewhat subsidised in the process. I also want to point out that people should not be travelling to red list countries. So, the only people who should be coming back to quarantine, government quarantine, are British or Irish citizens or people with permanent rights of residence. And there should be a limit to the number of people who are still abroad and wishing to return. So I do just want to stress, I do sometimes come across cases where people are still using the red list as if it's okay, I can come back in hotel quarantine. That should not be the case. However, if she has individual cases, I'm concerned to hear about them. The system is handled by the Department of Health, and I'd be very happy to pass them on.
Number 10 is withdrawn, so we go to Peter Grant.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Secretary of State has quite rightly sounded a note of caution that anyone who chooses to travel to an amber list country needs to be prepared for the possibility that it becomes a red list country before they return. What happens if someone has booked to travel to an amber list country and it becomes red before they travel? Has he had discussions with the travel industry and the travel insurance industry to determine whether passengers in those circumstances will be entitled to a refund, or will they simply have to sacrifice a holiday and lose all their money?
Well, I have to say the travel industry, I think, has actually stepped up to the plate on this by and large. And we're seeing a situation where nearly everywhere where you could book, and I just encourage consumers to take a look, you're able to guarantee a refund or a change of date if there's a change in status, and holiday insurance become quite adept at this as well. Government's also tried to assist. So, for example, we've introduced, it used to be with ABTA that you could, with ATOL, that you would be able to get only a cash refund. We've made those vouchers effectively government guaranteed, so people can take them with assurance, and that, of course, is helping the travel sector as well to weigh up their difficulties in cash flow. So I'm working very closely to answer his question with the travel industry. He's absolutely right to raise the case. The most important thing people can do is check before they book, particularly now, particularly this year, to make sure that refunds and rebooking is allowed within the contract.
Now go via video link to Sir Roger Gale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. His statement will be a lifeline to the aviation industry that he's done so much to try to support throughout the pandemic. Inbound tourism clearly is very important to the economy of the United Kingdom, and I therefore hope that he will be successful in swiftly ensuring that overseas visitors, not just returning British passengers, will be able to enter into the United Kingdom relatively easily and safely. Madam Deputy Speaker, I hope that my right honourable friend will also be able to work with the FCDO to seek to ensure that all World Health Organization approved vaccines are accepted in overseas countries, and particularly including, of course, the countries of the European Union like France. Finally, and referring back to the issue raised by my right honourable friend, the member for Maidenhead, about queues at border posts, will my right honourable friend ensure that not only at airports, but also at the channel ports particularly, there are facilities to ensure the swift flow of passengers?
Thank you very much. I would say that I absolutely hear the call for inbound tourism. I've heard it from both sides of the House. We are working on that as a phase 2. There are, of course, some further complications in terms of how to accept different proof of vaccine, but I absolutely agree with the idea that we should, of course, be accepting vaccines which have been approved by the World Health Organization as a very good basis for this. He makes an excellent point about not just airports, but other types of ports, and of course those across the Channel Tunnel are some of the busiest in the country. I do think it is right to tell people that these additional checks are likely to cause delays potentially on both sides of the border of the Channel this summer, and that people will want to prepare and plan their journeys with supplies and also ensuring that they have picked the best time of day to travel in order to avoid it. But I'm working already very, very closely with my French counterpart to try to minimise any delays as much as possible.
We now go via video to Margaret Ferrier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I also welcome today's statement by the Secretary of State. However, the latest ONS stats on the coronavirus job retention scheme show that 57% of employees in the passenger air transport sector remain on furlough. Can the Secretary of State tell me what discussions he has had with the Chancellor to extend the furlough to avoid a job crisis in the aviation sector before furlough ends?
Well, the furlough scheme, as the Honourable Lady knows, is part of a national scheme, UK-wide. It's supported those in aviation, but across the economy. Of course, it is starting to wind down through September, and that's why I think today's announcement is particularly timely, because it gives the ability for aviation and travel companies to get going again. And I do hope that closer to home, the Honourable Lady will put pressure on the Scottish Government to follow, because at the moment we seem to have a situation where there's more support being called for from Scottish members, but the most important thing of all, allowing these airlines to fly, doesn't seem to be forthcoming from the Scottish Government.
Sir David Amos.
Welcome my right honourable friend's statement today that not only football but air travel is coming home, and I will not repeat colleagues' points about clarity, testing, self-isolation, wearing of face masks and the rest of it. But will my right honourable friend please reassure me that as a result of his announcement there is absolutely no need for Southend Airport to stage more night flights, which really does cause a nuisance to local residents?
Well, I congratulate my honourable friend for shoehorning two things into this question. First of all, 45 minutes before anyone mentioned coming home and got it into aviation. And secondly, night flights, which is not entirely part of my announcement today. I know that Southend Airport is very important to his local economy. I won't comment on the night flights position specifically, but I was relieved to see that flights will be able to continue there after the operator experienced difficulties recently.
We now go via video link to Naz Shah.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I too welcome the statement from the Secretary of State this afternoon. However, what is he doing? I'd like to understand what he's doing to fix the issue with the quarantine hotels. My 34-week pregnant constituent who returned to the UK was quarantined in Greenwich in the O2 Arena, a Continental Hotel. On day 1 and 2, she ended up in hospital, was denied a travel to hospital on day 6 for a scan. By day 8, she lost her baby and spent 4 days in ICU because she nearly lost her life. Will he meet with me to discuss this and to ensure that we get quarantining right for families, and especially this tragic case of my constituent?
I welcome the Honourable Lady's welcome of the package, and I'm very, very sorry to hear about that situation that she outlines. It is the case that, of course, everybody in a quarantine hotel should have access to medical assistance. I'm not aware of the details, but I'm very happy to help arrange for the correct minister, which will actually be in the Department of Health, to meet with her to discuss her constituent's case.
Dr. Ben Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I very much welcome the announcement from my right honourable friend today, which will make such a huge difference to families wanting to see their relatives, to businesses in my constituency, and of course people who also want to go on holiday. But can I come back to the point of reciprocity? Because while we can ease the measures domestically, of course it's what happens when you land on the other side that also impacts the ability for people to work, to see relatives, etc. And I think ideally, we want to have international safety standards and a sort of international approach which is synchronous across all nations. I was wondering if he could update the House in terms of his discussions taking that forwards.
I do want to pay tribute to my honourable friend's campaigning on this subject. He's done a great deal on talking about the safety standards and campaigning to get to a situation where we can help reopen things. He's right to talk about reciprocity as well, and he'll be interested to hear that I chaired a meeting of the G7 Transport Secretaries, my equivalents, earlier in the year, and I'll be doing so again later in the year. Our drive is to introduce those international standards because clearly coronavirus isn't going away anytime soon. We want to make sure that there's an internationally recognised system in place. So we're doing our part, since we happen to be chairing the G7, to make sure that those standards are recognised globally.
We now go via video link to Martin Day.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We find ourselves in the position where previous failures of the UK government have left us as a centre for a new variant. So how does the Minister's plan for ending quarantine take account of keeping future new variants out and therefore the consequent impact that this may have on the ability of UK citizens to then travel?
Well, as I've explained, first of all, I don't accept the premises of his point. We have had one of the most rigorous border checks in place. In fact, I was in this House only last week where I think every single speaker from all sides of the House urged an opening up. So I'm interested to hear his views. But secondly, the steps in place are to still require a pre-departure test and still require a PCR test on or before day 2 in order that it can be sequenced, and of course all the other guidance which exists as well.
By video link to Henry Smith.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I warmly welcome the Secretary of State's announcement today. It's absolutely the right measures to be taken, but can I encourage him to, as soon as possible, go further and look to expand the number of green list countries that international travel is possible to, particularly working on that US-UK travel task force, because it's estimated for every day we don't have meaningful transatlantic flights, it is costing the UK economy some £23 million per day.
Well, I do want to pay tribute to my honourable friend for all of his work and campaign on this subject. I know his constituency is very much impacted by the success or otherwise of aviation. In answer to his point, yes, we will certainly look at those countries which fall into the red, amber and green categories. For the purpose of clarity for the House, it's probably helpful for me to say that that review will take place next on the 15th of July, so not very long to wait. There are then 2 checkpoints, one on the 31st of July, that's looking at the system and its operation in total, and again on the 1st of October, which are already actually in the programme going forward.
Jim Shannon.
Speaker, can I also thank the Secretary of State for his update as always. Would the Secretary of State outline what steps have been taken with the Republic of Ireland government to ensure that correct tests have been taken into assessment? This is an issue that my constituent and his pregnant wife had only on Monday past, in which Ryanair supplied test was deemed to be insufficient, and around 300 people were placed in one of the quarantine hotels with no idea at all of just what had happened and what had went wrong. So how can the Secretary of State assure my constituents that the right information is conveyed to the travel sector so as to make international travel as smooth and as understandable as possible?
I wasn't familiar with that Republic of Ireland situation, but I will undertake to speak to my opposite number, we do speak regularly, and receive an update and perhaps write a letter back to the Honourable Gentleman with information to take the case further.
John Howell.
Deputy Speaker, and I welcome my right honourable friend's statement. I realise that this is not his decision, but what additional evidence does his statement provide to help the House of Commons authorities in their deliberations on whether my delegation can return to Europe?
Well, far be it from me to get between an honourable member and the House authorities, but I do have to say it is time for those delegations to be able to return. We have set out today a form of travel where amber can be treated as green, where double vaccination, or I should say full vaccination, because some people will have a single vaccination in the future, plus 14 days, provides reasons to travel. And I very much hope that that then brings to conclusion, I know this long-running situation where the Honourable Gentleman and others have not been able to travel to do important Council of Europe and other business.
We now go via video link to Anam Kosei Javed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The newly appointed Health Secretary has said that the UK Government's policy of returning to normal may lead to as many as 100,000 COVID cases per day. It's entirely possible that with these case rates, uncontrolled by the UK Government could lead to further curbs on UK travellers abroad. How will the Secretary of State's plans announced today accommodate these projected domestic case rates?
Well, I'm grateful for the question. I think it's important to know that we're in a different phase of this coronavirus now, where never before have we had the majority of our population double vaccinated, and everybody is welcome to come forward, and indeed should come forward if they haven't been for the vaccinations yet. The rest of the world isn't quite in that situation as yet. They will want to get themselves to that position, and increasingly, therefore, the focus isn't so much on the specific case rates. After all, we're not vaccinating children yet, and we wait for the Joint Committee on Vaccinations and Immunisation to let us know whether they wish to, whether it's scientifically proven to do so and advisable. But in the meantime, what we really are interested in is, of course, the hospitalisations and deaths. Other countries will experience the same thing, and there's no reason, as we've seen throughout this coronavirus, to think that one country's epidemiological situation is different from another. We know that whilst we may have been suffering from the Delta variant, that other countries sadly will do in the future. I hope they can get themselves vaccinated in time.
We now go via video link to Simon Jupp.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The whole travel industry will welcome today's decision, which will help build confidence in the industry and amongst passengers. Clear and concise guidance will be needed quickly for airports, airlines and travel agents to navigate the additional paperwork required to check passengers' vaccination status. But given that some people can't have the vaccine for medical reasons, what can be done to provide confidence that we aren't moving towards a two-tier society?
Well, he's absolutely right. The airline industry, for example, says they're looking forward to working with the government to continue this momentum and further open up markets, and I welcome his welcome of today's announcement. He's right as well to point out that there are some people, for various different reasons, I mentioned in my speech, people who've been on a trial, for example, who wouldn't qualify under the normal circumstances. The other set of people, of course, are people who are clinically unable to have vaccinations for various different reasons, and we will bring forward guidance on all of these issues.
Video link to Andrew Gwynn.
Thank you. My constituent, Tracy Crabb, has been double jabbed, but she's one of those who's had the Indian manufactured COVID Shield version of the AstraZeneca vaccine, which the EU currently doesn't recognise in their digital certificate travel scheme. This is absolutely crazy, given this drug is no different to the AstraZeneca vaccine manufactured here. Some EEA countries have said they'll still accept COVID Shield, but most have not yet. And France apparently considers people with this jab as being unvaccinated. So what's he going to do to try and get some common sense on this issue so that Tracy and thousands like her can enjoy some of the international travel freedoms he's just announced?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Gentleman's absolutely right, of course. If it's recognised by the World Health Organization, there is no excuse not to recognise it. We're working with our colleagues, friends and colleagues in the EU and elsewhere, and I'm pretty certain this situation will be resolved.
Peter Bone.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm very grateful to the Secretary of State to come to the House and making this statement, and also for all the work he does behind the scenes to support the travel industry. But I have a concern. If I understand the Secretary of State right, amber countries can now be travelled to. The restriction has gone. However, the Foreign and Commonwealth advice still today for countries is you can only go for non-essential, you shouldn't go for non-essential travel, for instance, Germany and Italy. So will that guidance be updated now for the July the 19th so that people can plan in advance?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. I should explain two things. First of all, FCDO travel advice is about the danger for somebody in a country. And of course, that could be about COVID, but it also could be about political unrest or some other natural or other crisis going on in that country. So it is by necessity different from the traffic light system. The traffic light system is interested in the risks posed by that person having visited that country on their return to the UK. But he raises a very important point about the travel advice to people going to amber countries, which at the moment says don't for the purposes of holidays, for example. We will be changing that advice for the 19th to make it clear that people can travel for holiday and other reasons.
Tricia Gibson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I confess that I was quite surprised by the response that the Secretary of State gave to my colleague, the Honourable Member from Glenrothes, on the issue of travel insurance, given that consumer body which has found that many travellers are being left with a false impression about the travel insurance protection they would enjoy in the event of COVID-related disruption to their plans, with less than 1% of UK travel insurance policies providing people with full comprehensive cover for COVID-related disruption. In view of these concerns, will the Secretary of State undertake to discuss with the travel insurance industry to make sure that consumers can have confidence that they are appropriately covered in the event of disruption to their travel plans?
I want to be clear with the House. I mean, it has involved some sort of cajoling, I would describe it as, to ensure that the travel industry is in the right place more times than not. And I'm aware of the which report she refers to. I'm also aware that the monopolies, the competition authorities, rather, have been looking at this in the case of one or two of the larger airlines have undertaken action. It is very important, and I hope that she will accept, the government is very much on the side of consumers, and we do want to see flexibility in the system. That's why we backed the ATOL system for vouchers to be accepted, to both make it easier for travellers but also for the industry, and we will do everything that we possibly can to assist. I'm very happy to accept her offer and arrange for the aviation minister and perhaps with the appropriate ministers across government to meet and discuss this issue with her.
Simon Feld.
Madam Deputy Speaker, may I warmly welcome this announcement. It will be much relief to companies like Travel the Globe, based in my constituency, who are a very successful travel business who have struggled over the last 18 months of uncertainty, and also to families and individuals hoping to travel and reunite with family. But given that double vaccination is key to unlocking international travel, what message does my right honourable friend have to those who are still yet to book their second jabs?
One of the things that is important is people are fully vaccinated, and that means with the vaccines we're using at the moment, 2 jabs, and then you have to wait 14 days, and then you're able to use this new dispensation we've announced today on amber list travel and not have to quarantine. So the message is simple. If you haven't booked your second vaccination, you've had your first, please book. If you haven't booked your first, book that. We've reduced the waiting time to 8 weeks for those under 40. Please use this as the reason to get on the website and get yourself booked in for that second jab.
Stephen Doughty.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The government made some major mistakes on our borders last year, but it is right that we move forward in a pragmatic and sensible way now in light of the success of the vaccine rollout. And I've heard from many constituents and working in the travel industry in Cardiff South and Penarth and many small travel companies who have been hit hard by this crisis and want to see international travel resume in a safe way. But can the Minister just be absolutely clear about the situation for residents in Wales? He talks here of UK residents who are fully vaccinated through the UK vaccine rollout will not have to quarantine if they come back to England. Obviously, we will expect announcements in due course from the devolved administrations about their own ports and airports. But Welsh residents coming back into a UK airport, Heathrow or somewhere like that, they will not have to quarantine. Is that correct?
Yes, I do want to stress that this is an announcement that I'm making for England, that we're working closely with the devolved administrations. There is, of course, only one international airport in Wales, which is Cardiff, and I very much look forward to the administration there coming to their own conclusions. They will also need to describe what happens, as was the case when we had country changes on the corridor, on and off the corridor list, to travellers who come to an English airport and then wish to travel across the border. I am sure that between him and I, we can convince them to do the right thing, get on board with this and enable both English and Welsh to travel with ease.
Now have a video link to Ronnie Cowan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I apologise to the Minister if I missed it, but I didn't hear one word of his statement about the international cruise ship industry, an industry which has now fulfilled the government's request for a crisis workshop with foreign Commonwealth and development officers, and they've taken the extraordinary step of agreeing to a memorandum of understanding on repatriation. Can the Minister reassure the international cruise ship industry that as he talks about increasing traffic between international airports and he talks about opening the international economy, that he will not neglect the international cruise ship industry and the 88,000 plus UK jobs that are reliant on it?
Well, the Honourable Gentleman is absolutely right to stress the importance of the cruise industry, and he'll be pleased when I tell him that these moves do include cruises from the 19th of July. Indeed, we've enabled cruise ships to sail already with up to 50% where people have been double vaccinated. So yes, they're included, but I do have to say to the Honourable Gentleman, it is a frustration that we have been allowing cruise ships in English waters, but they have been banned from docking at Scottish ports for the last month or two. If he really wants to help those 80,000 people employed by the cruise sector, maybe he can start by talking to the Scottish Government about that.
Now go by video link to Stephen Hammond.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I warmly welcome my right honourable friend's statement today, and I've listened very carefully to his answers. Can I ask him just to clarify 2 of those answers? Firstly, in regard to the amber list review, if one is on the amber list on the 31st of July, by implication, it will still be on the amber list until the 1st of October. Is that correct? And given that Verify and the EU digital travel passport are already in place, how quickly does he expect the UK to be able to join schemes and allow all foreign fully vaccinated travellers to come to the UK?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I must caution that the House and everybody listening that, of course, it is the case, whilst opening up today and making these announcements, that an amber list country could, in theory, switch to being a red list country. I can provide him no such guarantee that from July to October there may not be changes. There could be. Nonetheless, I think most people realise by this stage that the path of the coronavirus is unpredictable, and I hope that this double vaccination measure provides some reassurance. So it can change quickly, and I do want to reassure my honourable friend that we will always act in to the best benefit of people and securing their health going forward.
Question to Dr. Liam Fox.
Deputy Speaker, I very much welcome my right honourable friend's statement, can you consider issuing some separate guidance for business travellers who have multiple short visits abroad? Clearly, it's self-evident you can't take a test 3 days before returning if you've only got a 1 or a 2 day visit. So, given that many business travellers will undertake such visits, will he issue that? And can he also give a commitment to publish the criteria on which the decision to place a country in green, amber or red is taken? Because if the travel industry knew what the criteria were and the methodology, they would have an idea of the direction of travel rather than having sudden events imposed and deadlines imposed upon them.
So, sure. Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, my right honourable friend is absolutely right to mention the case of, for example, a business traveller who might go from A to B to C. One of the things which is little noticed is that the test is up to day 2. It's not a day 2 test per se. I think it might be helpful, though, if I were to write to him in more detail about the application and how that would work under this new system with regard to, for example, somebody travelling perhaps for business to many different places. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm pleased to tell my right honourable friend that on the gov.uk website, the methodology for the JBC is already set out, and it does include subsections of a number of different criteria applied. I often hear people say, X country has fewer cases than we do, so why aren't they on the green list? The answer is probably they're not sequencing their genome, they're not uploading it to the GIS-aid internationally recognised format, perhaps they're not vaccinating people at quite the rate that we have. So there are many different factors, but they are all set out by the JCB.
I thank the Secretary of State for his statement, and I'm suspending the House for 3 minutes to make arrangements for the next business.